think it's Lake Superior?
No, it's Erie.
Erie.
You have a little bit in the Finger Lakes region in Germany, and here in Germany has very little yield because they just don't have the cold. We have the optimum climate here for it. We have the warm, moist summers to make it grow, and then we have the cold winters. Okay, so getting into ice wine. With ice wine, to make it properly, an ice wine grape has to be left on the vine. So we'll leave these grapes on the vine now. They'll stay until sometime in January. We have to have temperatures that are roughly, well, below zero. So in Fahrenheit, they want it roughly 27 to 28 degrees for 3 consecutive days for 72 hours. Then they'll go and they hand harvest the grape. Now that grape, when it's a regular grape like you have now and they're harvesting this grape, you'll get 10 drops of juice out per berry, per grape. So today is a great day. Look at this beautiful weather. I ordered this for you. I talked to the big man upstairs. I said, you know what, need another good day for these folks. And he goes, okay. So this is what we got. So that and Mother Nature, right? Because we gotta be fair. We gotta have mail and everything, you know, whatever. So anyhow, here we are. Here we are to have fun today. So I hope you had fun yesterday. It was a good, fun-filled day, and I know I had a lot of positive comments from people coming off the bus yesterday. So that was very nice to hear. So today we're going to head down to the boat ride first. So leave whatever you want on the bus. Don't take extra things with you. Leave it on the bus. Then we'll have the bus.
After all this time,
That is gorgeous.
I know it.
Wow.
Most of the books and paraphernalia have been written by non-Indians, and the Indians are quite offended actually by the idea that the maiden was sacrificed in some ritual, when in fact the story as depicted in the film is the way it really happened, which is a much more interesting story, by the way.
Is it only a legend? Perhaps. But there are those who say you can see her still in the rainbow of the mist. And the influenced conqueror is the wonder of this place the Indians call thundering water, Niagara. With the coming of the Europeans, the white man learned what the Indians had always known. Water was the way west. Whoever controlled Niagara controlled the ridges beyond.
How many are told? running down all the Great Lakes, so Superior, Michigan, Hurons, they all run down through the St. Clair River, which is basically Windsor and Detroit. Okay, so just think of Detroit, they go past that, and there's lock systems all through that. Water goes from there into Lake Erie. Lake Erie is the shallowest of all lakes. The opening of Lake Erie to Niagara River is where you went across on the Peace Bridge. Okay, that's the beginning of the Niagara River. The Niagara River then flows, goes over the falls, continues with the Niagara River for about another 6 miles, and flows into Lake Ontario. And this is Lake Ontario. So at the end of Lake Ontario, on the far end, which is 190 miles, I believe, it goes, no, that's kilometers, sorry, less than miles, 150 miles. Then it goes out into the St. Lawrence River, goes past Quebec. Then it goes down to the east coast where we have our eastern provinces, which would be like, I think it goes by Nova Scotia. And then it goes from there into the Atlantic Ocean. And that's where the water mixes, fresh water to salt water. Right? Now, does salt water come up the river? Not much, but it does. It does come partway up the river only because of flow or winds, but mostly it's the fresh water going out into the salt water. But yes, we do get, it's really funny, they get sharks up the St. Lawrence River, but they only go as far as the fresh water, because they can't survive in the fresh water. So there's a mix of salinity and regular fresh water, and they don't go past that, because that's just as far as they go. So they can get them at different times of year up, and that depends on spring runoff, winds, all kinds of weather and temperature. But yes, they do have seen sharks, and they have caught them in the St. Lawrence River before. Any other questions?
Niagara River is the only river that flows north.
So what we've basically done is we've gone around Lake Ontario. A lot of stuff goes on. There's commercial fishing out there, all kinds of stuff, just like there is in Lake Erie. There's industry further out. There's Canada on those picturesque trips from Toronto all the way out to BC. Those are the Via trains that go through. That's not the particular one, because the one that does go across has that beautiful big domed roof on it. That's all glass. So anyhow, so we do have a lot of salmon, but it's the river that it'll go up to where the whirlpool is. So people will go fishing in the whirlpool for salmon. Yeah. But the problem is we have a lot of chemicals in our lake system from factories and industry. So we have guides, fishing guides. You can look online and look them up. They'll tell you up to what size of fish you can and cannot eat. Because if it's too big, it's too old, it's been in the lake too long, it has too many chemicals or possibly mercury in it. So they say don't eat that meat. There's good for sport fishing, but don't eat the meat. Now there's certain people that do eat it, but our walleye up in Lake Erie can get up to 30 inches, 32 inches. Like they're big fish. Then we also have, in the river itself, we have a lot of bass because they're smaller fish and they're younger fish, because a walleye can grow so quickly that a 2-year-old walleye can be 20 inches, 27 inches. So it's not like some other fish that take, like a pike we caught up north at my buddy's cottage was 35 inches, and they figured that pike was probably 12 to 15 years old. But in that lake up there, you can eat it because it's a very clean lake. It's just these lakes because there's so much probably dumping that goes into the lakes. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Sorry.
Where does the water
$3,200 for a 2-bedroom condo down here. Yep, that's what it is. The condo, well over $1 million. The condo's well over $1 million. Yeah, that's a cheap one. That's probably a bachelor down here. It's about $800,000 or $900,000. Yes, homeless encampments that they build all the time, and they're usually under this thing called the Gardner Expressway. This upper elevated because they want to get out of the elements, right? So they'll be down below them. What's that? $900,000. $800,000 plus your monthly fee, your HOA, which is probably another $600 or $700. Yeah. Toronto's very expensive real estate. Second most expensive real estate in Canada. The most expensive real estate in Canada is Vancouver. Yeah. Vancouver, some ethnic origin. We have Little Portugal, we have Little Italy, we have Chinatown, we have the Caribbean town, we have Greek village, we have all these different communities. And I'll tell you a little story about one which is interesting. When I was working at the border about 10 years ago, I had a car pull up. It was in the summertime. And I said to the gentleman, you know, your citizenship, and he handed me 4 passports for him and his kids. And then I said, where do you live? And he just looked at me, and I thought, oh, maybe he's a deaf mute or something. I don't know, right? So I said, right, then we get it. So I said, sir, where do you live? And he said something. He turned his head and looked at his son in the back seat, and his son put his window down. He was about 12 and said, oh, we live in Toronto, sir. I said, oh, okay. I said, and how long were you coming from? And he said, we're coming from New Jersey. And the kid kept answering the questions. I finally said to the kid, I'm sorry, I don't want to be rude, but does your father not speak? And it could happen, right? And he said, no, my dad doesn't speak English. I'm looking at the passport, Canadian passport. I said, how long has your dad been in Canada? He goes, well, I'm 12 and he's been here a lot longer than that. But you know what it is? They live in their communities in Toronto. They live in a Portuguese community. They go to Portuguese banks. They go to Portuguese grocery stores. They go to Portuguese restaurants. They visit with their friends. They work with Portuguese. He was a bricklayer. He said, so he goes, he doesn't need to learn English. And I said, I get it. That's fine. God bless you. Good for you. You know what? That's what keeps our country so multicultural. And we let them have their communities. We don't push them out, right? And then after work, they come and pick up their kids, right? They pick up their dog and then they go home with it. And during the day, they get walked and bathroomed and fed and everything else. It's a doggy game. Like it's crazy. There's just one up here on the right-hand side, and if you look in the window, you'll see them all running around and jumping and playing. That's where the roof is open right now, but that's where the Blue Jays play. So right that, and then over beside that is something called the Scotiabank Arena, and that's where the Toronto Maple Leafs play. So yeah, don't go because they're not a very good team, but anyway. Okay, I like them too actually. My wife's a Toronto Maple Leafs fanatic, so we have to watch every single game on TV. So that's all right. That's cool. Now what you're going to see too, compared to a lot of other cities that I've been in too, is look how much parkland they still have in Toronto. There's still a lot of greenery. Where you go in the city and have trees that are probably 100-year-old trees, they don't. They just won't take it down. They want everybody to commute, use their bikes, do things. Yes, and there's our famous black squirrels again. They're good eating. I'm joking. No, I'm not. Actually, a friend of mine does eat them. So. And I have tried it. I've tried it. I've eaten squirrel. Not crazy. It's like dark meat chicken if anybody ever asked. You know, everybody says it tastes like chicken. Yeah. It does. It tastes like dark meat chicken. That's it. We just got a new prime minister because the old one was so bad and in bed with so many people they outsplit him out. So our new one, well, they all are. So whatever. So our new one too. He used to be though the head of finance for all of Canada. So he's a smart dude. Also, he worked for London, for the UK. He ran all their finances for like 3 or 4 years. Very, very smart man. So he's now our prime minister. I think he's doing a better job. So,
what's his name?
Mark Carney. Mark Carney in Ottawa. So our capital for Canada is in Ottawa. Okay. The capital for Ontario, this province, is Toronto. But our capital for all of Canada is Ottawa. Yeah.
No, they were together. Yeah.
Guitar. Your station first. Good job. Mrs. Taller. Turn. Circle. Circle. Start. Stop. Circle. Circle. Here. Start. Start. Circle. Good job.
Just like every one of our animals here is an Ohio animal. This critter is like the cool ones you're gonna see, unfortunately a rescue. So this is where things get a little sad. If you get to go outside, you're gonna see animals who've been injured, got sick, stuck in forest fires, stuck in a trap, abandoned by their mama, stolen by humans. It happens all the time. This little buddy, he's got a story too. You'll get to hear about it in just a moment, but as you'll see, he is quite impressive. For he stays hidden out in the wild, but he is Ohio's largest reptile.
Is that a snapping turtle?
This is the snapping turtle, and he absolutely is, my friends. His bite is quite strong. Now, I'll tell you this, everybody. People tell you all sorts of lies. They want to tell you all the time that this animal, he can bite through a broomstick. This animal can bite off your finger. It ain't none of that's true, friends. My buddy is strong, but he don't even have a mouth like that. Did you guys
That's Donnie.
Donnie?